Xiaomi is known for making great products with high-end specs at a reasonable price. Their latest attempt to raise the bar is the Xiaomi 14, which is an almost compact flagship phone. They launched the phone globally at the end of February. In this review, I will deep dive into the phone and also compare it to the Galaxy Samsung S24. The screen is 6.3 inches. The size of the phone is exactly right for me. It is not as big as the S24 Plus and Ultra, so you can use it one-handed when needed. And it's not as small as the S24, where you feel everything is cramped on the small display when scrolling through social media or watching a YouTube video. The display is 1200 by 2670 pixels and is LTPO, which means it will lower the refresh rate to preserve the battery. Unfortunately, the phone doesn't get as bright as it should, and I felt it's noticeably less bright than the S24. With my measurements in manual mode, it doesn't surpass 500 nits, while the Samsung S24 reaches 780 nits. This is also quite visible when you are outdoors. Under direct sunlight, the phone is not dark, but I would not categorize it as bright for sure. Next, I want to talk about the unboxing a bit. I highly appreciate the bumper case and pre-installed screen protector. The manufacturer doesn't spend more than a couple of dollars to add these options. But it is very important when you just get your new phone and you absolutely want to make sure there is no scratches until your actual bumper case and screen protector arrive. I usually buy Spigen cases, and I link my favorite case down below. I also love the fact that they include a 90 watts charger. There is even a headphone in the package, which looks like a prank because there is no headphone jack. Please correct me in the comment section if there is something I missed. I also added an unboxing video to the description down below. The fingerprint scanner is snappy, but for my taste it is a bit too low, and I have to do some maneuvering to reach it, especially after using the S24 for a while. What I enjoy about it is that when you lift the phone, there is always an indicator that lights up on the display where the on-screen fingerprint scanner is located. I'm also impressed by how high quality the phone feels in hand. It is the first time I have bought a Xiaomi flagship phone, and I'm used to their budget line. It feels light and premium. There are a few drawbacks though. I don't like how some text is written on the back, it just makes the phone look cheap. The shiny glossary back is not for everyone, and you may or may not like the camera bump and the elevation it creates when you put your phone on the table, especially because the phone drifts when it is on the table. The back is also very slippery. These issues can be solved by using a case. The phone also has a great stereo speaker, which often is not included in more compact flagships. Moving on to performance, the phone has a Snapdragon 8 Generation 3, which is the latest and arguably the best chipset on the market. It means you won't get reception and connection issues for 5G. To test performance and thermals, together with an estimate of the battery life, I'm running a few tools. First, I wrote an Android program that shows the battery temperature together with the battery percentage, signal strength, CPU utilization, and current, which is milliampere drawn from the battery, and always shown on top of the app and also logs the data in the background. I will also use AnTuTu benchmark. I also heard from the GSM Arena review that the Xiaomi 14 has throttling issues. That's why I will also use a throttling CPU test. I let the phones run the AnTuTu test. On the left side, we have the S24 Snapdragon, in the middle, the S24 Exynos, and on the right side, the Xiaomi 14. Throughout the test, the Xiaomi 14 was running noticeably cooler, which has something to do with being larger and having a better cooling mechanism. The Xiaomi 14 was drawing the most amount of current, which had something to do with having a larger display and more pixels to render. Towards the end, the Exynos reached 45 degrees Celsius, which is 112 Fahrenheit, and dimmed the screen. Also, you probably will notice the Xiaomi 14 is running hotter at the end of the test, but the reason is that the CPU does not throttle until it reaches 50 degrees Celsius, whereas for the other two phones, the temperature limit is much lower. Even though on paper all phones had 92% left by the end of the test, the amount of current drawn was not similar, and they didn't use the same amount of energy. The result was in favor of the Xiaomi 14 with a score of 2 million, whereas the Exynos was 1.7 million and S24 Snapdragon was at 1.8 million. Now we move to the throttling test. The Exynos was the first one to throttle around 5 minutes mark and dim the screen since it reached 45 degrees Celsius, sooner than the S24 Snapdragon. It was also using 15% more current. Soon after, the S24 Exynos also dimmed the screen. The Xiaomi went without throttling until the 15 minutes mark, until it reached almost 50 Celsius, which is 121 Fahrenheit. But the problem is, instead of gradually decreasing the frequency of the chipset, it just dropped it like a ball. This is definitely a problem. But on the other hand, I can think of a very few scenarios where you will want your phone to reach 50 degrees Celsius. Namely, it can happen if you are capturing a 4K video under direct sunlight in a hot summer, or you play a heavy game on max setting for more than half an hour. Again, all phones shows the same amount of battery percentage, but that number is misleading. The battery has a 4610 mAh capacity, while the S24 is 4000 mAh. I will do a dedicated battery test later, so don't forget to subscribe to not miss that video. According to GSM Arena, it scores 14.4 active use, which is lower than my Sony Xperia 5 Mark V by 2 hours, but is above the Samsung S24 by 2 hours, and 3 hours more than Google Pixel 8. The score for the S24 in GSM Arena is based on the Exynos, and since the Snapdragon version of the S24 holds more battery, I would say the Xiaomi 14 is more on par with the US version of S24 Plus. The other positive side of this phone is that it can charge the phone in half an hour using a 90-watt charger. I tested, and from 0 to 100, it took the phone exactly 32 minutes to get fully charged. Moving to software, the UI of the phone is HyperOS. You can expect at least 4 major software updates and 5 years of security patches. I feel HyperOS has a lot to offer, but simultaneously, the UI is a bit too crowded for my taste, and whenever I get a new Xiaomi phone, I have to spend a few minutes just removing stuff from it and customizing the UI. But this is a similar experience that I have with Samsung and their bloatwares. Notably, the phone comes with not only Facebook, but also TikTok pre-installed. Like, why? And a bunch of other apps including Mi Remote and Xiaomi Community, Mi Browser, and you name it. If you come from a clean Android UI experience like Motorola or Pixel or even Samsung One UI, there's a small learning curve. But I find the UI quite intuitive, and some stuff like the way the app drawer looks is more practical than a vanilla Android experience. They also pick some stuff from Apple, like if you swipe on the top from the right side, you will go to the setting, and if you swipe from the left, you will go to the notification tab. You also get some additional functionalities. For example, you can make a clone of your app so you have the same installed twice on your device. Also, the camera has some AI features that are super cool. You have your typical erasing subjects from the pictures included, and it also works fairly well. Or for example, you can fake the sky so it looks more like a sunny day, something we definitely need to do in those cold, cloudy evenings in Vienna. That's a good segue to move to camera capabilities. The phone has 3 cameras: main, telephoto, and ultrawide. The main camera uses an OVX9000 sensor, while the other 2 are Samsung. All 3 cameras are 50 megapixel, and you can go between 23mm to 75mm zoom levels. For reference, 50mm is roughly what the human eye would see. This is on par with the triple camera setting on the S24, which means I can compare the cameras quite easily. I took 2 sets of pictures during the day and night, and for reference, I also put S24 Exynos photos next to them. During daylight, seemingly both phones take very detailed photos with good dynamic range. The colors on Xiaomi 14 are more poppy and vivid compared to the S24, but this is more a matter of taste and personal opinion on which one you like the most. I really like the selfie camera quality, both for the photos and the videos, but for some reasons I only see the 1080p option and I could not record in 4K. Let's see how the sound quality is when a train is passing by and it's quite windy. I am now using the front camera. The camera can take 8K videos at 24 frames per second if HDR is off, up to 30 frames per second. The quality of the video is impressive and it definitely is flagship quality. I also particularly like the smooth zoom and transition of the camera. I prefer if I had 4K 60 frames per second option, which is something I use often. When taking pictures up close, the Xiaomi 14 again saturated colors a bit more. Unfortunately, both cameras created a weird banana effect. As you may have seen in my previous videos, the S24 Exynos struggles with white balance, and it was the same case here. Xiaomi 14 made whites actually white, whereas the S24 Exynos added an unnatural tint to them. The same story for this building. Exynos made the building unnecessarily yellow. This is even more apparent when you look at the video they both took at night. Galaxy S24 made better stabilization and they were less jittering. But at the same time, the color is completely off and oversaturated with yellow because of the yellow lights in the street. I should also mention the photos and videos were done after the update on the S24, so the updates didn't fix the white balance issues. In general, to my surprise, Xiaomi 14 is taking more natural photos and the camera, in my opinion, offers better quality compared to at least the S24 Exynos, or at least it is on par with it. Last but not least, let's talk about pricing. Pricing is usually Xiaomi's main selling point. The disappointing thing is that the price of this phone is around 1,100 euro, which makes it more expensive than the S24 and puts it on par with the S24 Plus. But Samsung usually has great deals. At least in Austria, the only place I could buy this phone was through Amazon, and even though they included 350 euros free tablet, it is not a deal that appeals to me since I don't need a tablet. I will link the Amazon link down below. I think Samsung could easily get away with this pricing, but Xiaomi just can't. All in, I find the Xiaomi 14 a decent phone to compete against the Samsung Galaxy S24 and S24 Plus, especially if you live in Europe and you're in the market to find an almost compact phone. The camera, in my opinion, is better than the S24 and S24 Plus Exynos at first glance, and the battery also lasts longer than the S24 Exynos. On the other hand, the price is not competitive in my opinion for the Xiaomi brand, and throttling is a thing. You should also decide if you are comfortable with having a brand that is not as well known in Europe compared to others, and there's certainly some stigma to it. If you want to check other options, maybe check out my video on Xperia 5 Mark V or S24 Plus that is popping up right now. Thanks for tuning into Tecmo, and until the next one, bye!